Soulblight is set to be a really big thing in Age of Sigmar because of the launch of Cursed City and the recent release of the Crimson Court. Also, with the impending launch of the Soublight Gravelords Battle Tome, you're going to be able to use this tutorial to paint the undead vampiric skin of the Soublight Gravelords.
Then the entirety of the cosmos is accessible through each and every individual's mind, connecting to the great mind, the great spirit.
Welcome back to the channel, collectors. So in today's tutorial, we'll be using the Vyrkos Blood-born from Cursed City to learn how to paint the cold undead vampiric skin tone for maybe your future Soublight Gravelords. The idea for undead skin to be cooler is because they don't have oxygenated blood, I think. Therefore, the color tends to be a little bit colder than normal skin tone. However, because they have veins coursing through them, there's some color variation in their skin tone. And these are the things I think about to make the skin tone look a lot more realistic. I find that this is a common mistake for many painters, including some of the high-level professional painters, where they just have a linear progression for color in their skin tones. In real life, skin isn't just one color. There's a variety of colors even on the same person. So this is something that I want you guys to take note when painting skin tones in the future. For this model, we'll follow the method of how we usually paint up the Contrast Enemy series. First off, we're going to do an airbrush sketch, and after that, we're going to use the contrast to do the base coating and shading. Thereafter, we're going to do some layering and detailing and finish up this model. So if you don't have an airbrush at this time or don't like using an airbrush, don't worry, because I am currently painting and recording a tutorial of how you can achieve a similar effect of the red underglow without using an airbrush. So before we begin this project, we're going to need these colors right here for the entire project, okay? So let's get out these colors and we can begin the airbrush stage of the painting process. So if you're ready, let's begin. Alright, so right now the entire model is being coated in Evil Sun Scarlet from the bottom so that we can create the glow. And then right here, I'm going to be using Scale 75 Intense Black to spray from the top to create a little barrier between the red and the future white highlight. And right here, I'm going to be using Wall Colors White to create the spot highlight. You can use any white from any brand, this doesn't really matter. Now that we have established a gradient using the airbrush, we're going to move on to the contrast stage. For the contrast stage, I'm going to be using a synthetic squirrel hairbrush. This tends to be better because I find that it's a lot less springy than the Kolectiv series and doesn't leave as much brush strokes. This is the usual ratio where I thin my contrast paints. 3 portions of contrast medium to 1 portion of paint. I do this in several layers to build up the colors, and this allows me to achieve a really smooth transition. And you gotta trust me on this, don't use water, just spend the money on the contrast medium. Although it's a lot more expensive, it achieves a far superior effect. Also, one tip for using contrast paint, remember, it's better to overload the model and clean it up later than to have multiple applications, because that might cause unsightly type marks. So let's get these colors ready for the contrast step. Alright, get these colors ready and let's get contrast painting right now. So now starting on from the previous airbrush sketch, I'm currently using thinned down ultramarine blue and I'm doing a glaze all over the skin areas. Don't worry if this goes all over the place, it's okay, we can always clean up later. Preferably you don't leave too much pooling around, and always use a dry brush to absorb the excess contrast paint. You want to do this in thin layers so that you can achieve a smooth transition. Okay, now that the ultramarine blue is done, I'm going to be using Games Workshop Contrast Paint Skeleton Horde to wash down and glaze down the fur bits as well as the armor bits. I find that this makes very good pitted brass and armor looking colors, and I'm gonna try making him blonde. I will change this color later, so don't worry. Okay, so with Gore Grunter fur, I'm also going to be trying to make him brunette. This is not really required. However, you can try different colors of the hair to see what suits you. I'm also using this color to create a color variation on the fur bits on this miniature. Okay? Using it for the belt too. Right here I'm going to be using skeleton horde, and I'm painting up the metallic armor on this Vyrkos Blood-born. So far the miniature is looking pretty okay already. I think after this step, if you are into just tabletop, this looks fine as a tabletop model already. Currently right here I'm using contrast Black Templar to darken down his hair. Wow, the contrast really settled very nicely in all the crevices and done up all the shading properly already. Now that stage is complete, we're going to move on to the layering stage. At this stage, I deliberately chose a more desaturated but warmer color so that I can start layering up the skin tones. Also in the contrast stage, I've added in some pink areas, and these areas also need to be layered up and highlighted. This creates variation in the skin tone, and I find that this makes the model look a lot more interesting. So before we begin the layering stage, why don't you get these colors ready? Get these colors ready, okay? And let's begin the layering stage right now. Alright, so right here I'm going to be using Vallejo model color Stone Grey to start warming up the skin tones. Because the contrast has left the entire skin tone really cold, what we want to do is I'm trying to get a neutral to warm color to start highlighting this, to give it a bit of the rotting human flesh that he probably has. He's supposed to look pale like a cadaver, and this is the color that I chose. So Stone Grey has a tinge of green and it's very warm and desaturated. That's why I've chosen it. Moving on, I am placing in a little bit of Vallejo model color Pale Sand to slightly increase the value and slightly warm this up even more. Don't worry if the contrast is a bit too white now, because you can always make adjustments along the way. Right here I'm going to be using contrast Volupus Pink, and this areas that I'm going to be focused on is the nose, the elbow joints, finger joints, toe joints. As I mentioned, skin is not one color, and you want to make sure that there is some very subtle skin variation for the entire model so that this looks as realistic as possible. So right here I'm going to be using a Basilicarium Grey on the dark side of the model, just to darken down the stone and the masonry so that the red can stand out even more. We're almost done here and the model already looks pretty awesome. And now it is time for the most gratifying part of miniature painting. Welcome to the last stretch of this model where we paint up the Vyrkos Blood-born. At this point of time, I'm going to be picking up the little details on the face as well as make the non-metallic metal sword look a lot more reflective. I find that these finishing touches will make this model really pop. Alright, so before we begin the detailing stage, get these colors ready. Alright, just a few colors here. Last stretch. Okay, let's get the details done right now. So for the rusty pitted brass armor, I'm currently using Vallejo model color Pale Sand to pick up the edges. When I pick up the edges, I really like how these things are showing up. Okay, I'm gonna be using the same color to pick out the handle and the hilt and the guard for the sword. With a mix of Vallejo model color dark grey and Vallejo model color pale blue grey, I'm gonna do some light overbrushing on the stone masonry. How can this be a collective video if there's no overbrushing? Overbrushing is my thing, man. That's why we gotta just overbrush over the entire model. If you wanna learn what overbrushing is, go check out the overbrushing video. I'll include a link in the description below. Just do this in a haphazard cross-hatching way so that it creates some rough textures. Okay, right here I'm gonna be using pale blue-grey mixed in with a little bit of Vallejo watercolor pale sand to create the highlights on the sword. I want to make sure that the light source is a little bit warmer so that this glint on this sword stands out even more. It's looking marvelous already. So right here, what I'm doing is that I'm adding in a little bit of pure white. Use any brand you want to show off the strongest highlights. And right now, after creating the base, I'm using some overbrush and I'm placing on some Evil Sun Scarlet right here. So this is proof that you can do this even without an airbrush. Stay tuned, I'll be doing this entire tutorial without an airbrush next week. So you don't want to miss that out. Okay, right now I'm going to be using Vallejo watercolor Emerald Red, and I'm going to be picking out the little details that will be catching on some of the red light coming from the bottom left corner. Okay, so I really like this model because this gives us a lot of opportunity to showcase where the light can catch from the underside. I like to do this underlit models because this also makes the miniature look a lot more dynamic, and I like how the color temperature and the contrast works. So remember, these techniques are really fast. Why don't you just give them a try? And if you can, tag us on Instagram and I'll be very happy to share with you any tips and tricks that comes to mind. Okay, just picking on some of the more reflective surfaces, and in just a little bit we'll be showing you the final result. Wow, now we have done with the Vyrkos Blood-born. This is the final result, and I'm really happy with this result of Vyrkos Blood-born. You can paint the two other Vyrkos Blood-born in the same way, and this technique can also be done on your future Soulblight models. So I hope you found this video tutorial useful. Remember, you can also use this for the rest of your Soublight Gravelord models when they do release. If you found this video useful, why not just share it with a friend, give us a like and subscribe because it keeps the lights on and it keeps me producing videos like these. Also, if you want to support the channel even further, why not head on to our Patreon and you can get a slew of painting content which I painted over the past year. So thank you guys for watching all the way to the end, and I hope to see you in the next painting video. See you.